It's freezing cold. I just woke up. I have bedhead, and so I'm wearing a hat. And I'm in my jammies. But I couldn't quit thinking of this last night. I just got done reading Phantastes by George MacDonald, who C.S. Lewis and Tolkien all were, they both were really taken with MacDonald, and you can see a lot of things that they fed on and not copied, but got inspiration from MacDonald. MacDonald wrote, it's cold. MacDonald wrote, I think he got his inspiration from the Fairy Queen and Nordic myths and all of that. And anyways, he wrote, I don't know, in the 1700s maybe? He was Scottish. So his books do have to be translated because it's in the vernacular and we would never be able to understand it. But I just thought it would be, if you like things that are alike and like you see other things in the thing, thought I'd share it with you. Just give me a minute here. So, the main character is in fairyland, and he has all these adventures and experiences, from flowers to girls in mirrors to old ladies whose cottage has 4 secret doors. He meets this knight on his journey in fairyland several times at different, the knight is in different conditions throughout his adventure in fairyland. But at one point, the knight and him are together towards the end. I had the hiccups, sorry. And it says, our path brought us at last up to a wall of yew trees growing close together and intertwining their branches so that nothing could be seen beyond it. An opening was cut in it like a door, and all the wall was trimmed smooth and perpendicular. The knight dismounted and waited till I had provided for his horse's comfort. He became the knight squire voluntarily, upon which we entered the place together. It was a great space, bare of trees and enclosed by 4 walls of yew, similar to that through which we had entered. These trees grew to a very great height and did not divide from each other till close to the top, where their summits formed a row of conical battlements all around the walls. The space contained was a parallelogram of great length. Along each of the 2 longer sides of the interior were ranged 3 ranks of men in white robes, standing silent and solemn, by each with a sword by his side, although the rest of his costume and bearing was more priestly than soldierly. For some distance inwards, the space between these opposite rows was filled with a company of men and women and children in holiday attire. The looks of all were directed inwards, towards the further end. Farther beyond the crowd, in a long avenue seeming to narrow in the distance, went the long rows of the white-robed men. On what the attention of the multitude was fixed, we could not tell, for the sun had set before we arrived, and it was growing dark within. It grew darker and darker. The multitude waited in silence. The stars began to shine down into the enclosure, and they grew brighter and larger every moment. A wind arose and swayed the pinnacles of the treetops and made a strange sound, half like music, half like moaning, through the close branches and leaves of the yew tree walls. A young girl who stood beside me, clothed in the same dress as the priest, bowed her head and grew pale with awe. The knight whispered to me, how solemn it is. Surely they wait to hear the voice of a prophet. There is something good near. But I, though somewhat shaken by the feeling expressed by my master, yet had an unaccountable conviction that here was something bad. So I resolved to be keenly on the watch for what should follow. Suddenly a great star like a sun appeared high in the air over the temple. illuminating it throughout. And a great song arose from the men in white, which went rolling round and round the building, now receding to the end, and now approaching, down the other side, the place where we stood. For some of the singers were regularly ceasing, and the next to them as regularly taking up the song, so that it crept onwards with gradations produced by changes which could not themselves be detected, for only a few of those who were singing ceased at the same moment. The song paused, and I saw a company of 6 of the white-robed men walk up the center of the human avenue, surrounding a youth gorgeously attired beneath his robe of white and wearing a chaplet of flowers on his head. I followed them closely with my keenest observation, and by accompanying their slow progress with my eyes, I was able to perceive more clearly what took place when they arrived at the other end. I knew that my sight was so much more keen than that of most people that I had a good reason to suppose I should see more than the rest could at such a distance. At the farther end of a throne stood upon a platform, high above the heads of the surrounding priests. To this platform I saw the company begin to ascend, apparently by an inclined plane or gentle slope. The throne itself was elevated again on a kind of square pedestal, to the top of which led a flight of steps. On the throne sat a majestic-looking figure whose posture seemed to indicate a mixture of pride and benignity. Benignity? Never heard that word. I've heard of benign, but it's got a itty on the end. As he looked down on the multitude below, so he was prideful and friendly-ish. The company ascended to the foot of the throne, where they all kneeled for some minutes, and then they rose and passed round to the side of the pedestal upon which the throne stood. Here they crowded close behind the youth, putting him in the foremost place, and one of them opened a door in the pedestal for the youth to enter. I was sure I saw him shrink back, and those crowding behind pushed him in. Then again arose a burst of song from the multitude in white, which lasted some time. When it ceased, a new company of 7 commenced its march up the center. As they advanced, I looked up at my master. His noble countenance was full of reverence and awe. Incapable of evil himself, he could scarcely suspect it in another, much less in a multitude such as this, and surrounded with such appearances of solemnity. I was certain it was the really grand accompaniments that overcame him, that the stars overhead, the dark towering tops of the yew trees, and the wind, that like an unseen spirit sighed through their branches, bowed his spirit to the belief that in all these ceremonies lay some great mystical meaning which, his humility told him, his ignorance prevented him from understanding. More convinced than before that there was evil here, I could not endure that my master should be deceived, that one like him, so pure and noble, should respect what, if my suspicions were true, was worse than the ordinary deceptions of priestcraft. I could not tell how far he might be led to countenance and otherwise support their doings before he should find cause to repent bitterly of his error. I watched the new procession yet more keenly, if possible, than the former, and this time the central figure was a girl, and at the close I observed yet more indubitably the shrinking back and the crowd pushing. What happened to the victims I never learned, but I had learned enough, and I could bear it no longer. I stooped and whispered to the young girl who stood by me to lend me her white garment. I wanted it, that I might not be entirely out of keeping with the solemnity, but I might have at least this help to passing unquestioned. She looked up, half amused and half bewildered, as if doubting whether I was in earnest or not. But in her perplexity, she permitted me to unfasten it and slip it down from her shoulders. I easily got possession of it, and sinking down on my knees in the crowd, I rose apparently in the habit of one of the worshippers. Giving my battle axe to the girl to hold in pledge for the return of her stole, for I wished to test the matter unarmed, and if it was a man that sat upon the throne, to attack him with hands bare, as I supposed that his must be. I made my way through the crowd to the front while the singing yet continued, desirous of reaching the platform while it was unoccupied by any of the priests. I was permitted to walk up the long avenue of white robes unmolested, though I saw questioning looks in many of the faces as I passed. I presume my coolness aided my passage, for I felt quite indifferent as to my own fate, not feeling, after the late events of my history, that I was at all worth taking care of, and enjoying perhaps something of an evil satisfaction in the revenge I was thus taking upon the self which had fooled me so long. When I arrived on the platform, the song had just ceased, and I felt as if all were looking towards me. But instead of kneeling at its foot, I walked right up the stairs to the throne, laid hold of a great wooden image that seemed to sit upon it, and tried to hurl it from its seat. In this I failed at first, for I found it firmly fixed. But in dread lest, the first shock of amazement passing away, the guards would rush upon me before I had effected my purpose, I strained with all my might, and with a noise of the cracking and breaking and tearing of rotten wood, something gave way, and I hurled the image down the steps. Its displacement revealed a great hole in the throne, like the hollow of a decayed tree, going down apparently a great way. But I had no time to examine it, for as I looked into it, up out of it rushed a great brute, like a wolf, but twice the size, and tumbled me headlong with itself down the steps of the throne. As we fell, however, I caught it by the throat, and the moment we reached the platform, a struggle commenced, in which I soon got uppermost with my hand upon its throat and knee upon its heart. But now arose a wild cry of wrath and revenge and rescue. A universal hiss of steel as every sword was swept from its scabbard seemed to tear the very air in shreds. I heard the rush of hundreds towards the platform on which I knelt. I only tightened my grasp of the brute's throat. His eyes were already starting from his head, and his tongue was hanging out. My anxious hope was that, even after they had killed me, they would be unable to undo my grip of his throat before the monster was past breathing. I therefore threw all my will and force and purpose into the grasping hand, and I remember no blow. A faintness came over me, and my consciousness departed.